Think you've beaten your favorite NES game and gotten the true ending? Well, that might not necessarily be the case if one of the games I'm going to go over in this video is your favorite. There are more than 24 games on the NES that offer a second, third, or in a few cases even a fourth quest before revealing their final ending to the player. Now, I'm not just talking about a game that loops back to the first stage after beating the final stage and challenges the player to another run-through of the game without offering anything new to the player for doing that, other than a slightly increased level of difficulty. There are tons of games that offer that, like Contra, Donkey Kong, Sky Shark, or Elevator Action. What I'm talking about are games that give you a little something extra for beating them multiple consecutive times. This can be a slightly different ending, a special message to the player, or occasionally even the credits are hidden away for only the most dedicated players to earn. Air Fortress is both a shoot-'em-up and something of a maze-like platforming-ish game. I say platforming-ish because you don't actually jump on the platforms, but instead use some of your energy, which also acts as your health, to operate a jetpack to propel your player around the stages. Initially, it seems like you have to go through 8 stages, which each have 2 parts to them. Approaching the Air Fortress in the horizontal scrolling shoot-'em-up stage, and then navigating inside the Air Fortress's maze to find the core, destroy that core, and then escape the fortress. Once you've finally destroyed that 8th fortress, instead of getting an ending, you'll get an "attention" message telling you that the fortress has recovered its function, and the game will start back at the beginning. The second quest of the game is much harder, enemies acting far more aggressively, there's harder and more enemies being placed all over the game, and while the maze layouts are the same as the first time through, nearly all the elevators and pipes that you use to navigate the maze on your first quest will take you to different areas in the second quest, making the mazes even more confusing than when you first encountered them. If you see the second quest through to the end, you'll finally be rewarded with a congratulations message and the credits. Bobble pretty famously has a bad and happy ending for being super drunk as either a single player or with the second player also present. But that's not what this video is about. To even trigger the first end, you'll have to grab the crystal and enter the door on stage 99 quickly before they disappear. This isn't too bad with 2 competent players, and it's quite challenging to do, but still possible to achieve as a single player. Assuming you've entered the door, you'll be treated to 12 more stages, and then finally have your fight with Super Drunk. If you defeat him while both player characters are on screen at once, you'll get the first happy end, but also a message that states your adventure is not over yet. And after the credit roll, you'll see a screen that will end on a password, BBAJI. This code will activate Super Bubble mode, which is the game's second quest. The level layouts are the same, but you'll have different and more aggressive enemies to deal with this time. Now, after you've gone through all 99 levels, got the crystal and entered the door, played the extra 12 stages, and beaten Super Drunk with an active second player for the second time now, you get a bit different experience than the first time through. In addition to saving your lady friends like in the first loop, Super Drunk will be revealed to be 2 large pink humanoid creatures as well. You'll then get a thank you message and a list of all the game's monsters, and you'll be told that love and friendship is the most important magic in the world, and then after the credits, you'll have access to the game's sound select options. There are technically 3 endings to Barai Fighter's 4 different difficulties, but because of how they're accessed, it kind of feels like 2 quests. If you beat Barai Fighter on Eagle or Albatross difficulty, which are the game's 2 easiest modes, you get the same message for both. Great fight, warrior. An ace would see a graphic ending. What it's referring to by an ace is playing the game on ace difficulty, which is the 3rd and hardest option available when you first start the game. If you play through the game on ace difficulty, you'll get the graphic ending that was teased in the earlier difficulties, but also a couple other things too. You'll get some text saying that you rescued the universe, it'll ask if you found all 10 hidden rooms, and a mysterious message from Cal telling you that the ultimate challenge awaits. Now when you enter the difficulty select screen, you'll have access to ultimate difficulty, which kind of acts as our second quest here, since you can just start your initial run on ace and then move to ultimate while ignoring Eagle and Albatross if you like. Ultimate difficulty is an extremely ramped up challenge compared to Ace, and you'll likely make great use of those unlimited continues that you were thankfully provided with. If you can make your way to the end of Ultimate Mode, you'll once again get your graphic ending, congratulations, and have your score displayed, and then a new message. Unreal, you've finished an unbeatable game. You've earned my respect. This message is from the legendary Ken Lobb, aka Cal, or Ken Allen Lobb. Ken is an extremely important figure in the history of gaming, and particularly in the case of multiple quests on the NES, really pushing for them, and being involved in more of them on the NES than any other person. He'll come up several more times in this video from his years with Taxan. Stick around to the end of this video to hear some of Ken's insights directly from him about multiple quests from an interview I had with him last year. Not all second quests are worth your time or effort. Codename Viper is a great example of that. When you finish the game for the first time and are at the Mission All Clear screen, you'll see a code pop up on the computer monitor displayed on the left of the screen for a few seconds before it gets shot up. Afterwards, you'll see some text wrapping up the story, and then it ends on a The End screen. Entering the code begins the second quest. It's a bit harder than the first time around, with the biggest difference being checkpoints not being nearly as generous. This time, when you finish the game, you'll get nearly the exact same ending, with the only difference being that there's no password that appears on the screen before the ending text. Pretty unsatisfying reward for playing through this harder version of the game. Flying Dragon, the secret scroll, pulls the Ghosts and Goblins on you with a fake out ending when you beat it the first time. Along with the 6 scrolls that you had to obtain during the first playthrough, you'll also be told to earn 4 crystal balls on your second loop of the game. In addition to collecting the scrolls and the crystal balls, there will be certain enemies that you have to defeat in very specific ways on each of your loops. If you pay attention to the cutscenes, they will explain how to handle these enemies, but the manual also lays out directions to transform and truly defeat these characters if you happen to miss the instructions in the cutscenes. Thankfully, after the second ending, you finally accomplished your mission and used your Hiryu no Ken to maintain justice and world peace from the evil core. Easily the most famous example of a game with multiple loops. After defeating Satan, specifically with the cross weapon, you'll be told that your entire first playthrough was an illusion and a trap set by Satan, and to go through the game a second time. This time the enemies are slightly faster, but if you manage to beat the game once, it's not significantly harder on the second loop, and everything should feel familiar enough that it won't give you much more trouble than the first loop did. The second time defeating Satan with the cross weapon will award you with the happy end. Congratulations! Being the wise and courageous knight that you are, if you happen to feel the strength welling up inside your body and decide to do a third and fourth play through the game, you'll be treated to the same 2 endings once again that you just experienced. The first loop through Image Fight is not actually the game itself. It's a training simulation. You notice after each stage you get a percentage which seems to be based on your score for the stage. If your average score across all stages is at least 90%, you'll have passed the training simulation and be sent to the second loop, aka the special game, aka the real mission you've been training for in the simulation. If you fail the score threshold, you'll be sent back to the start of the game to try it all over again. After destroying the unidentified vegetation from another planet during the second loop of the game, you'll finally be rewarded with simply the end. Isolated Warrior is a bit mean in its design, in that it offers you continues to help the player out, but then punishes you for using them by locking you out of the final level and thus the ending if you use a continue. If you manage your way through the game without a continue, you'll have access to the 7th and final stage of the game. Beat that stage and you'll see the ending, and then after the end, it'll start a second loop of the game, as well as show you code to access the second loop in case you don't want to play through it again in one sitting. Now if you beat the game on the second harder loop, Also, without continuing up to the 7th stage, you get the same ending as last time, but before the end screen, you'll also get a nice credit roll too. It's not obvious that James Bond Jr. has a second loop. After beating the final boss in your first loop, he'll simply give you a code telling you that it'll start mission 1 again. But if you persist through the game's 5 missions on the second loop, you'll actually get an ending for beating it this time. You'll capture the Scumlord, destroy his island fortress, and then James gets a very lonely looking tropical holiday as his reward. When beating Kid Klown for the first time, you'll get a nice cutscene where you reunite with your family, and more importantly, find a vault full of rubber noses. Afterwards, you'll get a lengthy credit roll followed by a message telling you that there is a hard mode with stronger and faster enemies, and then be presented with the Konami code in a Kemco game. Before we get to the second quest, I just want to take a moment to point out a lot of other games that Kid Klown rips off besides using just the Konami code. They straight up copy the Amazon and Himalaya stages from DuckTales, even copying enemy types in the animation when you get stuck in a plant or in the snow. From Mega Man 2, they steal the giant anglerfish enemy from Bubble Man's stage, as well as the infamous Quickman giant laser area. They also borrow a bit from Chippendale Rescue Rangers with this section with the squirrels. The first boss in the whole game is a hedgehog with a nearly identical attack pattern to Metal Sonic from the end of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. These vine, cloud, and chain conveyor belt areas seem oddly familiar. This one is a bit more of a stretch, but due to the rest of these examples, I feel like it has to be intentional. This is an arthropod throwing mushrooms. It has to be a reference to Millipede, right? Anyway, back to the second loop. If you enter the Kemco code at the title screen and play through the second quest of the game, you get a slightly different The End screen. Same credit roll as before, and then it'll end on a screen that just says Excellent with a little Kemco logo. What a weird game. Metal Storm is a pretty cool game to go through once, and only once. It is a brutal test of patience, timing, pattern recognition, and endurance to play through the second quest though. If you beat the game once, it'll give you some story text to wrap up your adventure, followed by a code as it invites you to try a game for experts. That is very accurate. The second quest is meant for experts only. It is by far the biggest jump in difficulty that any additional quest on the system offers. If you can manage to limp and claw your way through the expert version of Metal Storm, you'll see the same ending text as before, but then be treated to both a nice credit roll as well as a proper The End screen. Everything in Milon's secret castle is hidden from you. I don't think any other game on the NES compares when it comes to information that is kept secret from the player. The fact that there is even a second quest is no different. When you beat the game the first time, you'll get a quick little message that you saved Castle Garland and a thank you for doing so. Right afterwards, the game goes back to the title screen. So you could definitely be forgiven if you didn't realize that if you press start on the title screen and go through the entire game again in the same sitting, there's actually a second quest for you to conquer. This time, you'll get the exact same ending plus an additional screen that states, "This is the end of episode 1. See you again." This one kind of behaves like Burai Fighter did. There are multiple difficulties to choose from when you start the game up from level 1 to level 4. But if you beat level 4, then you'll get access to level 5 difficulty, which is what we actually want to play through. Upon beating the level 4 CPU, you'll get a congratulations message, and then a message telling you to try Master Stage Computer, level 5, no time limit. And by pressing start, you'll immediately start your match against the level 5 CPU. For beating this Masters Challenge, you get the same congratulations screen, but this time it'll be followed by a credit roll featuring the legendary Satoru Iwata. and then a nice little thank you screen. You're very welcome, fellow. Another fairly easy one to overlook, and a bit unsatisfying to finish both quests considering the amount of skill required to do so. Finishing the 5 unique races of the game will immediately start you back at race 1 again after getting your score. But if you can muster your way through the 5 races again with harder CPU opponents this time, you'll be rewarded with Game Over before taking you back to the title screen. Thanks, I guess. If you pay close attention though, you may notice that during the 10th race, right as it starts off, instead of telling you your qualifying rank, it will instead inform you that this is in fact the final stage of the game. I would consider this one the black sheep of the multiple quest games. While most of the games on the list don't offer a whole lot of incentives for playing through them an additional time or two, they do offer at least something, whether it be a credit roll or an extra message to the player, or even in the disappointing case of Codename Viper, something is different at least on the screen from the previous playthrough. Super Mario Bros. Doesn't offer the player anything other than the experience itself. Granted, it's a really good experience, but even Othello seemed more final in its end screen. I think most people are familiar with the second more challenging quest offered after beating The Legend of Zelda. But when you beat the game for the first time, you get the ending text, some credits, and then a screen telling you to start the second quest. What do you get for beating it a second time? Mostly the same, but after the credits you get to see how many times you died, which for most of us isn't really going to be a reward, but more of an embarrassment. But then it'll at least tell you that you have amazing wisdom and power before telling you that this is the end of The Legend of Zelda 1. Remember earlier when I was talking about Barai Fighter and I said our friend Ken Lobb would appear more on this list? Here's where he starts making a comeback. Because he doesn't just like having a second quest, he's all about 3 quests to truly beat a game. And 8 Eyes is a pretty interesting one to start with. Upon beating 8 Eyes for the first time, you get a nice long message stroking your ego a little bit, but then it takes a turn and suggests that the only thing more gratifying than coming to the end of a great game is realizing that the challenge has just begun. Good luck, here's a password for your next adventure. This is Ken Lobb speaking directly to the player again like he did at the end of Barai Fighter, and something he's going to do again in other Taxan games. If you can beat the second quest of 8 Eyes, you'll get a different message, this time about how unbelievable you are, and how your video game talents are the best in the world, and that you've now beaten one of the hardest games you'll ever play. Or have you? Which is pretty cryptic, isn't it? Here's where it gets a bit weird. Unlike the first quest, you won't receive the password to access the third quest that was just referenced. You'll have the credits flash on screen very briefly, and then the game will just repeat the text that you just saw. Nothing in the game itself, the manual, or the packaging will tell you how to access that third quest of the game. If you happen to have the May-June issue of Nintendo Power, the one with Super C on the cover, in the classified information section, you can finally get the password of Final Stage to begin the game's third quest. If you can manage to finish 8 Eyes' third and hardest quest, you'll be treated to the final message from Mr. Lobb. This time, congratulating you for beating one of the most challenging games on the home video screen, and tells you to look forward to other extremely challenging games from Taxan. The ending for Low G-Man shows your character walking through some of the game's environments while telling you that peace has finally been achieved and that your efforts were worth it. It also gives some hints about secret areas, and then Ken Lobb gets a little poetic on you. Battle is over, hope it was fun, you're not done yet, the game has just begun. Cal. After that, you'll start the second quest of the game, as well as be given the code to start from this point. For beating the second quest, you'll again get the same ending as you did for the first one, but with a new poem attached to the end. In there with the best, you beat the second quest, up to the final test, Ken Lobb. And if you can beat the third and most challenging quest, which the combined final stage and boss are quite a beast, you'll get treated to the same ending again, followed by Ken Lobb's greatest poem. Finish the game? Yes, that is so. If you think you're good, just wait for G.I. Joe. And then, if you wait a full 35 seconds, which seems like forever when waiting for an ending, you'll finally get to see those sweet, sweet credits roll by. Freedom Force is a bit interesting, as it kind of has multiple quests. When you beat the 5 stages, it'll give you what it calls a secret word. The secret words are just names of other Sunsoft published games. All 3 secret words are Spy Hunter, Xenophobe, and Platoon. These were part of a mail-away contest in the manual, so if you were able to learn all 3 words by beating the game 3 times, write them onto this page and then mail it away to Sunsoft, and you can earn yourself some presumably cool decals. Neat! If you beat the game a 4th time, you'll get a congratulations screen with no secret word this time, but there's an Easter egg if you press A on the second player controller. You'll see the name Hirokun appear, which is the name of Hiroaki Higashiya, the lead programmer on Freedom Force. Being another Taxan/Ken Lobb game, G.I. Joe, a real American hero, works very much like 8 Eyes and Low G-Man with its 3 classes. Each time you beat the game, you'll always get the same text ending congratulating you for beating Cobra Commander, followed by a little montage of all the boss enemies you fought throughout the game. After that, it'll end on a password screen with a code to let you start the next quest of the game. After that password, you'll get a little message telling you, let's go to the second quest. For finishing the second quest of the game, you get a very similar ending, but this time during the boss montage, you'll also see the game's credits too. After your password to open up the third quest appears, you'll get one more message screen telling you, try the final quest if you dare and find the check marks if you can. This is referring to the stages that you need to plant explosives on the check marks. In each loop, they get moved to different areas that are even harder to find or harder to reach. For completing the third quest of the game, you'll get mostly the same ending, including the same password you got for finishing the second quest. But after that, you'll get a splash screen with the words, "Is this truly the end of Cobra? Maybe. ... Which honestly kinda sucks after going through the game 3 times. But that is followed by a special message from Ken Lobb about you having proven your abilities by beating this expert quest, which is a much nicer screen to end. After your first run-through of G.I. Joe the Atlantis Factor, you'll get a short cutscene where you sink the enemy island with a cool space laser. After that, you'll see a montage of each of the good guys on screen for a while before an ominous "to be continued" message appears. It's not very obvious that there are additional quests here since it doesn't tell you or offer you a password to start the next quest, but if you immediately start a new game after finishing your first quest, you will start the second quest. After beating the first stage, you'll start getting new passwords for the second quest though. After beating the second quest, you get the same sinking island ending, but the cast montage is now expanded to include some cool art from each of the stages in the game as well. This is followed up with the same "to be continued" message. Again, like the second quest, you have to immediately start the new game and beat at least the first stage to get the first password for the third quest stages. In the third quest, you have considerably less health and ammo, making it quite a leap and challenge, but if you can make your way through, you'll be rewarded with the sinking island cutscenes. Afterwards, the cast montage has been changed again, this time to include the game's credits. Even though Ken Lobb isn't listed in the credits and this isn't a Taxan published game, he did confirm with me that he worked with Kid a bit to bring the game to North America. Sadly, there's no personalized message hidden at the end of this one. Gunsmoke has 3 loops to it as well, but it's very subtle about that. By beating the game once, you get a nice story cutscene about how the townsfolk remember how you saved them every time the sun sets, a satisfying credit roll, and then ends on a press start cue. When you press start, the game begins again. But unlike most games with multiple quests, it doesn't seem to be any extra challenge, it's just the same game again. If you beat it a second time, you get the exact same ending, which stops at the same press start cue. If you go through it a third time in a row, you'll once again get the same ending and credit roll, but the one difference is that this time, instead of the press start cue, the game will tell you the end. Kickmaster follows the Taxant formula for its multiple quests and endings. It ends with a cutscene of the Kickmaster leaving the enemy castle with the princess he had just saved, with some text about how he's restored peace and then disappeared until he's needed again. After that, you'll get a wonderful message from Cal, congratulating a fellow gamer and encouraging you to press start to challenge the second quest of the game. For beating the second quest of the game, you get the same cutscene and a new message from Ken that you did good, but only real game masters can beat the third quest of the game. Since you yourself are obviously a fellow video gamer and game master, I feel like I can share the ending of the third quest of Kickmaster with you. It starts off the same as the first 2 quests with your cutscene leaving the castle, and then ends on this encouraging message from Ken Lobb. Okay, you've proven your great skills. The third quest was very, very hard, but you have shown your ultimate ability. Keep playing, and never ever let a mere video game get the best of the very few, the truly proud, the Game Masters. Ken Lobb. While not part of the initial development team, Ken Lobb did work with them while they were finishing up the NES version of Magician, and it shows. If you just finish the game without getting all 10,000 MP, which you earn for doing all the objectives in each of the 9 areas of the game, you'll get a rude message after your triumphant scroll through the starting town stating that a real magician would see the conclusion of the story before sending you back to the title screen. If you manage to earn all 10,000 MP and finish the game, then you'll get an extra cutscene that provokes you to start your second quest, because a real magician would try a tougher challenge and then immediately starts you on your second quest. The ending, if you get all 10,000 MP again, is mostly the same for the second quest, with a much nicer bit of text tacked on to the end stating that you must be a real magician, but why not give the game one more try just to be sure? And then it drops you right into the third quest of the game. Once more, you'll have to beat a harder version of the game with all 10,000 MP. If you can manage this to get the final message after the ending. You are a truly great player to have come so far. You have really earned the rank of magician. Thanks for playing, and see you again in the future. Eurocom, Taxant Games. In The Legend of Kage, once you reach Princess Kiri, and she follows you out of the castle, she will immediately get taken away again by the last boss about 25 seconds after you just saved her. After defeating the boss, you'll walk off the screen and be taken back to the beginning of Stage 1. If you run through the game a second time, you'll get the exact same experience as you did the first time. If you're determined enough to see the game through a third time though, you'll get treated to a very quick cutscene of you running off with the princess and a short text conclusion that lasts about a few seconds before the game literally says, "However," and the princess gets taken once more, and the game throws you back to Stage 1 if you want to keep playing. There are 31 stages to each quest of Arkista's Ring. After beating the Shogun in Stage 31, you'll watch a short cutscene of his fortress crumbling before the game starts Stage 32. Stage 32 is just Stage 1 again. There's no real indication that you're on a second quest. And if you beat all 31 stages again, you get the same ending. And if you beat all 31 stages for a third time, you'll still get the same ending with no indication that you're working towards anything greater. But if you manage to beat all 124 stages of the game, you'll finally be rewarded with a simple message: "Thank you for helping me save Arkista's ring." The game will then start stage 125, which isn't really a stage, but a stat screen showing off a portrait of your character Christine and a list of all the armor and equipment she had at the end of the adventure. Kind of neat after defeating all those ninjas. Boulder Dash is a puzzle game with 24 unique levels. After completing all 24 levels for the first time, you'll simply get a screen saying, "Wonderful," and another saying, "Good journey," before the game tells you to try the next level, and offers the password to the second quest. The second quest levels are remixed and more challenging versions of the initial game. If you can make your way through all 24 levels again, you get the same "Wonderful" and "Good journey" screens, and a new "Try the next level" screen with a new password for the third quest. Quest 3 is again full of more challenging versions of the same levels you've already cleared and offers the same "Wonderful" and "Good journey" screens with the new "Try the next level" screen. The fourth time through these levels that keep creeping up in difficulty is an extreme challenge, but if you can manage your way through all 24 stages one more time, you'll start off with the same "Wonderful" screen, but then you'll finally be treated to a credit roll and the end screen after all of your hard work. Yet another Taxan game, and with multiple quests. But Ken Lobb did tell me that the game was finished before he was involved with Taxan, so he didn't have any involvement with this one. This game is a bit cruel in how it approaches its multiple quests. After finishing all the stages, you'll get a black screen with a picture of your character and the text, "Nice try, but not good enough for wizard, try again." Then you'll be sent back to the start of the game. To me, that text doesn't feel like it's pushing you to play through the game again, but more like it's scolding you for missing something on your previous playthrough. The really mean thing is that if you play through the second and the third quest, you'll get the exact same discouraging message. I can't imagine what kind of player figured this out on their own, since it's not a particularly fun game to play through 4 times back to back to back to back. But if you do, there actually is an ending for beating it 4 consecutive times. Congratulations, you have overcome your greatest challenge. Now you are a powerful wizard. There are so many other games on the NES that loop you back to the start after beating all the stages. Games that we mentioned at the start like Donkey Kong, Contra, Sky Shark, or Gradius, and countless others all do this. I don't consider any of those games to be multiple quests though, since there are no on-screen prompts encouraging you to try the harder version of the game or any special ending or reward for doing so. After years of playing and research, to the best of my knowledge at the time of this video, these 28 games are the only ones on the NES that reward the player for playing through the game more than once to complete the multiple quests. As someone who is directly involved in about 25% of the games on the NES that have multiple loops, I'll leave you with the master of multi-quest, Mr. Ken Lobb's own words on the topic.
No, mine. So with Bird Eye Fighter, again, that's probably the good one to talk to because that was the first game that I had any influence over. Came engineering background, got lucky, some guy found me, end up making video games, which is my dream, right? So it was kind of cool. And go to Japan after I started at Taxan, maybe it was no more than 8 weeks after I started, and first developer we visit was Kid, and they show us this game, which was actually more like Gradius. It had the little character, but he could only shoot, he could shoot 8 directions, but you had to hold the direction and shoot. And I was like, this isn't going to work very well because it was already like really hard to fly through they had a prototype level basically. And so it was my idea to do what if you just held the button and that locked you to the direction, and we prototyped it up in the first visit, and they're like, "We're doing this. This is great. What else should we do?" Right? And that's when I'm like, 3 difficulty levels. Is there any way you could add levels to the different difficulties? I like the idea of hidden stuff. So the kind of hidden scrolls in Burai Fighter, get yourself into the right place, all of a sudden it scrolls off, you level up. I also designed the whole level up system in that game. The idea that the ring, the laser, and the missile, that if you wanted to level it up, you had to keep it, right? So only catch rings, and then you level up rings, only catch. That was also my idea. So although I didn't design Burai Fighter from scratch, right, I came to this little prototype and added a whole bunch of stuff that became Burai Fighter. Again, like you said, including the 3 endings, hey, I'd like to get harder. This, yes, yes. Um, Again, then that led him almost immediately to, hey, we should sign them to another game. What would you like? And it's like, I like jumping really high. The Logi Man story is actually John Carter of Mars. You know, I, yeah, I like the idea of jumping super high. The movie was okay. This was the book, right? So obviously, long before the movie, those were the first novels I read when I was a kid. John Carter, really Princess of Mars, the first 3 books. I was probably 10, and that idea I became fixated with. What if you could jump really high? And in the case of Logi Man, it was, hey, could we jump over the screen? And of course, this was like the early days of the MMC3 chip. And they're like, yes, but we'll have to add this chip to the cartridge. And I get, do that. Yeah, anyway, that one was, like I said, pretty much mine from scratch. So I was able to ask, at least design the philosophy I wanted, multiple difficulty levels, all locked, with the multiple endings that sort of you didn't know were there until the end. Good fun. So it wasn't trying to be arrogant so much as I was quite good at arcade games, like exceptional. Probably the combination didn't happen until, had happened before. There was no such thing as esports in the early 80s, but around the Bay Area, there was a competition spread across a bunch of 7-Elevens. So you go try and get the high score on multiple machines, add it all up. If you had the high score for the week, 10 weeks, like 50 7-Elevens. They brought all those people together at Great America in the Bay Area, and they had a pretty cool tournament. 5 games, 3 minutes each. You got to try each twice, and then they take the high score of your 2 tries. I came in first. So beat like 500 people. I got a defender in my garage, from doing that. And I'm highly competitive later on Street Fighter. I just like competing. So how do you get that into a 1-player game? Well, again, to put it mildly, you talk smack, right? You put an ending up that's sort of, either challenging or respectful, right? And I went after if I just say, hey, you were good, but, right, maybe I can get somebody to play a second or a third time. The interesting thing is, and this goes back to a little bit what I was saying, if you're trying to reach millions or tens of millions of players, I don't get directly involved in games as much as I used to, but I talk to all the teams. Obviously, we have a lot of games going on in first party at Xbox. But one of the things I like team to think about is, hey, if your game is in Game Pass, that's just the vehicle I get to talk to today. Meaning you might have your game, no matter what it is, has a chance now to have 50 million players over the next 10 to 15 years, right? It's the thing I love about Game Pass is the games don't go like that and then stop selling and then end up on a used shelf. It's just anybody who signs up to Game Pass, even for a month, 4 years from now might decide, hey, I'm gonna try that game. That looks fun. So you got that opportunity to reach a whole bunch of people. How do you make difficulty for that? Right? You might be somebody's first game. You might be being played by somebody like you who's finished every game on a platform and has gotten exceptionally good at not just the mechanics, but design philosophy across a big set of games. You can figure out how to beat stuff, right? It's I think that there's still a place for easy, normal, hard. Absolutely. But I tend to like the different philosophy now is as games got really big, does a player have to do every bit of every game to see an ending? And that just happens naturally. If you make, I'll take yesterday's example, and I'm not really that involved, although I've talked to the team, Starfield, or maybe just go back in time, Skyrim. Do you do everything to beat Skyrim? What the hell does it mean to beat Skyrim? You can, there's an end, same with like gas games is probably an extreme, but there are little parts to things like Grounded. There's an ending to Grounded. There's an ending to Sea of Thieves. There's clearly Halo, which is easy through Legendary. And I've used that one as an example to talk to teams about a lot. Hey, if you're going to make a game that reaches a huge number of players, Legendary is not hard enough. And easy maybe isn't easy enough, right? So you should think about that. You should think about it's okay. For years and years, one of the problems I had talking to teams about easy, normal, hard, especially on the you have to finish, easy in order to see medium or hard, I'd get telemetry thrown at me. Well, gee, only like the best games, this is something you might know, right? The best games across the history of gaming, it's exceptional to have a game where 50% of players beat it. It's more usual that it's like 20% of players beat a game, maybe 30. And that's a game where the sequel sells more and the sequel sells more, and you go look at you do research on the people, and it's like, okay, so you got a third of the way through the first game, and then you bought the sequel and got halfway through, and then you never went back to those. Why? It's like, because beating a game isn't everything. Like for a lot of players, like, I'm going to go play with this game for a while. It's fun. Right. So in that world, why does making normal and hard and extra hard and ultimate difficulty, why is beating something on Legendary? Why does any of that matter? The world we live in today, it's because that's PR, right? The PR today is not game magazine, print ad, website, commercial. It's, are people making videos? Are Twitch streamers streaming? Is YouTube? Are there clips? Are there help things? It's the other thing. It's funny. Like I'll play games that aren't released now, and I get this like almost subconscious thing of, oh man, I don't know what to do here. I should go to YouTube. Shit, can't go to YouTube. Okay, I'll have to figure this one out. Oh well, it's random, but I actually think game design now that includes ridiculously obscure things that you need to go to YouTube to figure out is good game design, because that causes people, I think of those as YouTube side quests, right? I think it's weird if YouTube, not weird in the bad, you could argue that all the From games, they put YouTube in the golden path, right? If you don't watch YouTube, most players aren't going to figure out how to beat some of the bosses. And you think it's like, no, you got to get good. It's like, no, you just got to see their pattern once, right? A lot of times you watch a video on YouTube and go, that's what I was missing? Oh, duh. And yet what's funny, if I take Elden Ring as my latest example, which I've like 900 hours of Elden Ring, I love it. I wasn't having any problems with most of the bosses, but I still end up looking at YouTube for a couple things. And then you get the YouTube curation, right? So every time I turn on YouTube, it's like the most powerful what? Click. Where did you get that? And then I watch the YouTube as literally a side quest and end up like literally just after I finish the game in New Game Plus, start like using YouTube as okay, I want that armor. No, I need that sword. I need that, I need that blank. I need that blank. Maybe I should figure out, magic, even though I tend to be strength build, et cetera, et cetera. That obviously wasn't the case. This is a long answer to your question. It's like if I want somebody to play twice, the goal was to try and put some text there that like, oh, done. Oh. And the goal really was, can I get people that finish a game to immediately press start and try level 1 again? And part of the reason for that, I think, is the philosophy that, at least at some level, a lot of designers realize when they're building their game, It's that I think great games are more fun, and I don't mean this in a, I can explain if you have a question, but great games are more fun to replay than they were to play. So what I mean by that is discovery the first time through, that's fun, that's awesome. But mastery is where a lot of video games actually shine. The kind of, I'm going to redo that thing I know. It's why speedrunning is cool, right? It's why New Game Plus is cool. It's why, remasters work, because you get to go replay this thing you know. It's like, why would you do that? Some people watch a movie 15 times if they really, really like it. But in general, you go through a story thing and you do it once. A lot of video game replay, again, just the reality of, the economy. It's not just today's economy. All time. Video games aren't cheap, right? So especially for a kid, you get your 3 or 4 games and you naturally replay them because you can't necessarily, especially Days of Blockbuster were good because a lot of people rented. But I had a little bit of what you've just gone through. It's my last little kind of self bit. So how did I get in the game industry? It's you could probably do it and you don't think about it that way. Maybe you do. But I was an engineer, who had a great job, and I knew hardware, I knew software. Is that why I got in the game industry? Yeah. I got in the game industry because I met this person and I was an encyclopedia of NES games. My wife and I had reasonably good jobs, very good. We lived in the Bay Area. Housing was too expensive. So we were on this long trek to save for houses while we were 20-year-olds buying the shit we wanted. So for me, I bought the first over 100 NES games. I basically bought them all and beat them all. And that became the real education when I happened to meet this person. And, he showed me a couple of games and immediately I'm like, well, I know what I'd do. Like this game, you should think about this, and I've been thinking about if I was kind of designing games on the side for fun because it's what I wanted to do. Even though, again, I didn't go look for this job. That person found me through a store where I was going in and talking about games all the time. Super random. But that encyclopedic knowledge of games, I now have over 11,000 games. I have finished thousands of games. And it's my hobby. And yet, over and over and over through my career, this ability, and I'll just tell you what I do, right? Talk to a developer. I'll get some ideas. You don't copy other games, but you reference them, right? And by playing a large amount, what I can do is I'll go to a team, hey, have you seen this game? And if the answer is no, I don't explain that game. I'll just go to the next allegory. Oh, have you played this game? Oh, yeah, I played that. And then we can have a deep dive conversation on this thing that we have in common and then use those things as references for the games that they're enjoying. And I couldn't do that if I didn't have this kind of now bloated encyclopedic knowledge of again, almost every game ever made. And I think about that part a lot. I live in a unique period for a piece of technology. It's almost like Hollywood from 1890, the first time pictures were taken, through the 1920s, and then the implementation of sound, and then color, and then surround. If you took that 80 years and you compressed it into 30, that's what I got to do. I played Space War in college, right? I played every arcade game. Like I was in school during the heyday of arcade. 79 to 83. And I literally was at the arcade every day. And I was like, not just good. I mean, again, sorry for history lesson. I'll let you get back to your questions. But this last piece I think is important. It's one arcade that I was going to in Phoenix. They were doing this thing where every week they'd get a new game, every week. Right. And they'd take that game and it would be like, if you could get the high score of the week, you'd get 100 tokens. If you could get second, you'd get 50 tokens. If you get third, you get like 10. I got first place every week. So how did I do that? Well, because I had a bowl of tokens at home from winning the earlier weeks and not spending them all. Right? So I'd just come to the arcade with a pocket full of tokens and, Jungle Hunt. Well, I don't really like this game, but I'll play it for, 15, 20 tries, get the high score. I'm there every day. So on the last day when the thing is going to be done, if I don't have first, I'm going to sit there and throw tokens at it, and maybe get second, but it was first every week first. A couple of games, like one of them, Donkey Kong Jr. Pretty sure I had the high score in the world for a decade, and I didn't know it. I had 700,000. And it was just because not only did I get the high score of the week on that game, I fell in love with it. So just every day I'd go and I'd play a couple more until I got to the point where I was playing almost an hour. Got the high score easily, got my big bag of tokens. So that ability to understand and use, Hollywood does the same thing, right? I've got a lot of friends in the industry who have movie degrees, and all they do is reference earlier movies. And I got to tour USC a couple times, and helping them kind of pick their kind of grad student game projects, judging. And you talk to these students and it's like, well, this year I had to watch these 50 movies, and this year I had to watch these 80 movies, and then we had to tear down what makes that genre this genre. And I'm just like, yeah, that's kind of my hobby, right? This is what I've been doing with games forever, sort of. And if there's a last piece to this, I think part of my skill set, I know a lot of people that are like, hey, I don't enjoy games anymore because I've been making them so long. I just totally understand how that game is made. And it's like, so can't you just like try and beat it and have fun? And in a way I feel sorry for, and I can see those people tend to churn out of the industry. They just lose the passion a little bit. So long, all that, right? I'm sorry, was about replay versus play. And what I've seen kind of consistently across my career, when there's a team who's still having fun with their game near the end, it won't be all, because some of these people have, they've been at it for 5 years sometimes now, right? But if you can see this, some of the people on the team are like, well, we're done. What are you doing on lunch? Well, we're playing the game again. Oh, that game's going to be good. Rather than we're done with this game, we finished it. And even though I might love it, I start thinking, would I play that twice? Maybe. Would I play it 10 times? Maybe not. All right. Then it's like, well, those games are great. One-time playthrough games are fun, but the games that tend to live on through time can be replayed. And that goes all the way back to that first philosophy I had. I'd beaten all these NES games, and some of them were like, this is fun to play again and again and again. Super Mario Brothers, right? Until I found the warps and then was trying to race of how fast I could, 1, 2, 4, 1, 4, 2, 8, 1. How fast can I go? Right. Then after doing that several times, like, okay, I'm finally finished with this game, which was long after I had like 60 or 80 or 100 more games. I kept going back to Mario, and I was thinking about why, why is that game replayable and these other ones aren't? And I was trying to squeeze a little of that in. One way to do it was, hey, I'm going to pay you to replay by complimenting you, or, if you think you're good, try the next thing.